doubt anybody's going to actually see this, but that's fine. I'll work on some chainmail here. But I thought I would, have a brief conversation about some things. Pardon the squeaking, that would be the table, because I'm slightly leaning on it. But, I've been following what's been going on in Eastern Europe for a bit now. I know people who are actually in Ukraine, people I care about. And I have learned more than a few things with regards to, what's actually happening over there, as well as some of the history. And back here. There's a few points that a lot of people seem to miss. Don't talk about whatever. First off, everybody calls it Russia. It is not. It is Muscovia. 300 years ago, Muscovia and the Tsars stole the Ukrainian name and identity from Ukraine. If you've ever heard the term Kyivan Rus, only Ukraine has the sole right of descendancy to the Rus. By stealing the Rus name from Ukraine, Muscovia is stealing the Rus identity from Ukraine and claiming it for themselves. This is something they have no right to do. Now, the screwed up part in all this is the fact that not only is Muscovia not Rus, they're not even Slavic. They're Finno-Ugric descendants of people who actually betrayed the Kyivan Rus to the Golden Horde, the Mongols, about 800 years ago, so that they could become a privileged vassal state of the Mongols with the privilege of collecting tribute on behalf of the Mongols, from which they would, steal their cut off the top. Ergo, Muscovia, their entire culture, history, identity, everything is quite literally based on betrayal, lies, theft, subjugation, enslavement, genocide, etc. There's a gentleman on YouTube. You can look him up. His YouTube channel is called Savage Sage. He goes into a lot of this, a lot of these facts. And explains a lot of what I'm talking about. To give you an idea, you know that wonderful architecture that everybody loves that's in Moscow and St. Petersburg? Yeah, that's Italian. The cute little wooden nesting dolls, you pop one open, there's another one inside, you pop that one open, there's another one inside, keeps going down to your little bitty thing. Yeah, those are Japanese. Kyivan Rus, stolen from Ukraine. The Slavic language and Cyrillic alphabet, stolen from the Slavic people. The Muscovian language, you call it Russian, is actually a bastardized blend of anywhere from 4 or 5 different Slavic languages, which, funnily enough, and this is from some Slavic people that I know, they can understand between 60 and 80% of the so-called Russian language, but Russians can't understand a word of the Slavic languages. Funny that. Another thing people need to bear in mind, Muscovia has never given up their imperialistic ambitions and are continuing those ambitions as we speak, as they seek to genocide all of Ukraine and anyone and everyone who is not ethnic Muscovite, because Ruski Dusha, they're the only ones with a soul as far as they're concerned. Everyone else is subhuman, to be subjugated, enslaved, and genocided. And they plan to do that quite literally to all of Europe and North America. And they seek to control all of Africa, eventually the entire planet. They want to reclaim Alaska. Yeah, good luck with that. Considering I have friends in Alaska, and I know that 90 to 100% of the adults, 90 plus, we'll say that, are very well armed. And much of Alaska is impassable because there are no roads. And there are certain parts of Alaska you have to actually fly in. You can't, there is no ground transport anywhere across some of those mountains. Yeah, good luck with that. Never mind the fact that not only is the U.S. very well armed, when we are threatened, we have a very strong penchant for coming together. 9/11 ring a bell? The only time NATO's Article 5 has ever been invoked. Just wanted to point that out. Another thing I wanted to point out is the fact that Muscovia actually occupies the Soviet seat on the UN illegally. This has been discussed multiple times by multiple sources. What's the evidence? Well, let's see here. The Soviet Union no longer exists. The borders of the Soviet Union, Muscovite Federation, is not the same borders. It's not the same name. Even their intelligence apparatus, the name has been changed. Everything has been changed with regards to that country. Even their flag. It's not the same country. Add to that little nugget the fact that the Muscovite Federation has, to my knowledge, never actually signed the UN Charter. Therefore, they occupy the Soviet seat illegally. Ukraine and Belarus, formerly the Soviet republics of Ukraine and Belarus, they retain their original borders. And outside of dropping the Soviet name, retain their identity. They have UN Security Council seats, and rightfully so. But the Soviet Union seat should be vacant because the Soviet Union no longer exists. They bullied the UN to allow them to retain that seat, and they did not sign the UN Charter. They're occupying that seat illegally. Never mind the fact that they're in violation of international law by invading not just one, but 4 sovereign nations. Let's do a head count. They invaded Georgia. They invaded Chechnya twice. They invaded Moldova, Transnistria. They have now invaded Ukraine. Four countries, 5 invasions. Claiming, oh no, they'll never attack any other country. Yeah, that's what they said in 2013 during the Minsk Accords. Actually, no, it was before that. Yeah, that's what they were claiming right before they annexed Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk illegally. Sham voting at gunpoint, claiming that they were wanted there, as they send their military, claiming their military was never there. Yeah, they have every intention of basically invading the Baltics and the Nordic countries, Finland, claiming the rest of Georgia and Moldova, and let's see here, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and from there, pick a country. The Central Asian republics, Kazakhstan, and so forth. The Stan brothers is one person I heard refer to them. They're just sort of peripheral targets that they will annex at their leisure. Whether the people there want them to or not. In particular, there's a certain narrative that the Kremlin has been pushing. One, let me say there's a few of them, but a couple of them in particular. One, they're trying to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. The only Nazis in Ukraine came from east of the Ukraine Muscovite border. Just saying. Two, if Ukraine were Nazis, then why the hell is their president Jewish and voted in with a 72% majority? Just saying. Demilitarize? Why would you want to demilitarize a neighboring country unless you intend to annex, invade, and take over? How many of you remember mentions of Euromaidan? Revolution of Dignity. Started as a student protest. Turned into a full-on revolt against entrenched post-Soviet corrupt oligarchs under the control of the Kremlin. They were sick of it. They said, hell no, we won't go. No more. So Moscow got pissy, attacked Crimea, attacked Donetsk, attacked Luhansk, annexed by force. The Minsk Accords came about. The ink wasn't even dry from the signatures on the page when they invaded. After 8 years, full invasion in February of 2022. One particular friend of mine suffered 4.5 years of occupation in Donetsk. Anyone who has been subject to the Russian world wants nothing to do with it. And I hear these people whining and carrying on, war bad, West bad, blah, blah. You know, the usual Muscovite rhetoric. You have no idea what you're talking about. Especially when most of these people, one, don't live in Ukraine, two, do not live in Eastern Europe, and three, do not live in a country, many of them, do not live in a country that suffered from Soviet occupation. Seeing their fathers and grandfathers and brothers, uncles, deported to Siberia for re-education. Read as brainwashing. Another narrative that the Muscovites like to push is it's about NATO expansion. Now, this one pisses me off. NATO expansion is not a thing. It's a bullshit narrative of something that does not exist and cannot exist, and I'll tell you why. NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Pardon me, I keep bumping the stand. It's a defense alliance, not a country. An alliance is signatures on a piece of paper. Signatures on a piece of paper cannot, by definition, as an alliance, hold territory. Therefore, it cannot expand because it has no territory to expand. Countries expand territory, not alliances. A country may choose to join an alliance. There's no territory to expand. It's simply members of a group. That's it. For example, to bring it to a different thing, say you have a band, some sort of musical band, and you start out with 3 members. You want to add more members. People want to join your band. Your band grows. You have more members. You get more diverse. You have more creativity added to the whole. They're not expanding territory. They're merely adding members to improve upon what they already have. This is what an alliance does between countries. Okay? NATO, UN, EU, these are alliances. UN Security Council, European Union, that's a economic alliance. NATO is a defense alliance. You see where this is going. NATO expansion is not a thing. It does not exist. It cannot exist by definition because an alliance does not hold territory, only countries do. And those countries within the alliance are not expanding their territory. They're simply adding members. And these members choose to apply, these countries choose to apply for membership in these alliances. They go through a process to be vetted and to then build certain standards within the country that comply to the requirements and norms of the alliance, and then are permitted entry into the alliance. Oh, but it's about NATO expansion. Really? What about Finland and Sweden? They were just added to the NATO alliance. They chose to because they saw and had first front row seats to watching an imperialist, genocidal, fascist country invading and trying to take over their neighboring countries, smaller countries. Georgia, Chechnya twice, Moldova, Transnistria, Ukraine. Who's next? They're not going to stop with Ukraine. They have absolutely no intention of stopping with Ukraine. Putin very specifically stated that his country has no borders, meaning he intends on global conquest. The nations of the world need to wake the hell up, open their eyes, and realize Muscovia is not their friend. And if you don't stand up and stop this fascist, totalitarian, imperialist, expansionist country hell-bent on taking over the world by helping Ukraine kick them out of Ukraine once and for all, they're not going to stop until they are forced to stop. You cannot ignore a bully. I know this from experience. The only thing a bully, or in this case, an expansionist, imperialist, genocidal country, the only thing they understand is violence. The only way to stop a bully is not to ignore them, but to give them a good, swift punch in the nose. You bloody their nose sufficiently, they'll leave you the hell alone. And it's the same thing with imperialist nations like Muscovia. Just some food for thought. Looking at the Baltic countries and other countries in Europe and the people there who realize the truth and see Muscovia and Putin and his regime for what they really are, they're stepping up and they're saying, oh, hell no. And they are telling Putin on no uncertain terms, nah, we're not going to allow this. How are they doing that? They are pulling together money to buy ammunition and to allocate money for weapons, ammunition, armor, aircraft to send to Ukraine for Ukraine to use to kick the Muscovite horde out of Ukraine. For the more geeky among us, I'll give you an analogy that should resonate with a great many people that I know. Muscovia is Mordor. Now, I know some of you are like, oh, you're being hyperbolic. Just bear with me. The so-called Ruski Mir, a Russian world, and Ruski Dusha, Russian soul. Well, that's Sauron personified. Putin, Saruman. Weak, betrays his friends, pretends to be your friend only to very savagely betray you for personal gain. Ukraine? Oh, that's Gondor. Kyiv's the White City. Europe and the Baltics? It's Rohan and the Men of the West. England, of course, being the Shire. The North, what remains of the Numenor Kingdom, and so forth. Gondor has lit the beacon fires. Gondor is calling for help. Where is Rohan and the men of the West? Where are the elves? Where are the dwarves? Where are the eagles? That would be the US, by the way, in case you were wondering. Where are the allies who promised aid to Gondor if they were ever attacked? The Budapest Memorandum was signed by Ukraine, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Moscow. What is the Budapest Memorandum, you might ask? Oh, well, that's easy. That is the agreement that basically states that if Ukraine gives up its nuclear arsenal and some of its weaponry, that the US, the United Kingdom, and Moscow would honor their internationally recognized territorial borders, would not invade or seek to control Ukraine in any way, and should Ukraine be invaded, would come to Ukraine's aid to defend itself, so that Ukraine could defend itself against an aggressor. Moscow has violated every single tenet of the Budapest Memorandum and every single one of the Minsk Accords. No agreement made with Moscow can be trusted because they will break it every single time, just like they have done with Ukraine and every country around them. And by not sending aid to Ukraine, we, as the United States, are in violation of the Budapest Memorandum. Humanitarian aid is insufficient. Zelensky said it best when the full-scale invasion took place, when it started. I need ammunition, not a ride. He refused, adamantly and defiantly refused to leave Kyiv and abandon his people. He goes to the front line and meets soldiers, shakes their hand, talks to them. He goes to the hospitals to meet with wounded warriors, to talk to them, to thank them for stepping up to defend their homeland and their people from genocide. You will never see a coward like Putin do that. Never. Not once. Unless it's one of his so-called body doubles. He has people sitting clear across the room from him when it's actually him. He doesn't allow people close to him. And there has been studies taken from done by, I want to say Japan or Taiwan. I don't remember which. I'm sure someone will comment on which one it was. But they actually did a study of all the different appearances of Putin and have determined there's at least 3 body doubles. Based on facial recognition and subtle differences. Looks like him. Sounds like him. To the untrained human observer, sure. But to AI facial recognition software, not so much. Wouldn't surprise me if it was actually true, to be honest. Because of all the inconsistencies with his actions. And before anybody starts going on about blank checks and shit, let me point something out to you. The money allocated for aid to Ukraine never leaves this country. In fact, armor and munitions are selected from our stockpile up to a certain value. That is sent to Ukraine. We're talking munitions, armor, weapons that are more than 20, much of it more than 30 years old. We save, let's put it this way. The US would spend in the amount of money that it costs to pack up and ship these munitions to Ukraine is a very small amount compared to the cost of storage and maintenance of these old weapons. Many of them have to be refurbished or decommissioned. Again, this costs a stupid amount of money. The amount it would cost to store, maintain, and or decommission these weapons would equal between 3 and 10 times the cost of shipping it to Ukraine. So like I said, we are saving stupid amounts of money by shipping it to Ukraine and letting Ukraine decommission these weapons on the heads of invaders who seek to genocide all of Ukraine. Now, for those who sit there and say, oh, they're not trying to genocide Ukraine. Let's see here. The kidnapping of children and forcibly deporting them to all parts of the Muscovite Federation, changing their names, changing their birth dates, forcing them to accept so-called Russian passports, Russifying them by force, re-education, brainwashing. That is genocide. Sexual violence and mutilation of adults, men and women. Men being castrated, women being brutally and violently raped. so that they can never have children, Ukrainian children, and told that they will never spawn another freak, or some other derogatory word that they have for Ukrainians, or trying to forcibly get these women pregnant with Muscovite children as the product of rape. Genocide. The bombing of civilians. Mass murder of civilians. Genocide. The banning of language and culture. Destruction of cultural icons and symbols. Genocide. Everything that Muscovia is doing in Ukraine is genocide. Look it up. Look up the definitions of what constitutes genocide. And that's what Muscovia is doing to Ukraine. These are war crimes. Crimes against humanity. I am, by blood, Irish, Scottish, and Cheyenne. My father's family was Irish and Scottish. My mother's father was Irish and Cheyenne. We don't know what my mother's biological mom was, but her adoptive mother was half Cherokee, German and Irish, as well as German and Irish. Irish, Scottish, and Cheyenne. All three of those bloodlines have suffered genocide for the last 1,000 years or longer. Ireland has their own Holodomor in the mid-1800s. Over 1 million people starved to death, while more than that were forced to flee the country or die. A century before, the English king literally went to Ireland and slaughtered half the population of Ireland. Mind you, the entire island will fit inside the state of Oregon. Ukraine is roughly the size of the state of Texas, with a greater population density. Half a population slaughtered in a country, an island, 1/7 the size of Ukraine. And Stalin, multiple times, tried to slaughter and starve the Ukrainian people to death and eradicate them. Never mind what the Soviets have been trying to do since the fall of the Tsars. Never mind what the Tsars had been trying to do for hundreds of years before that. I was talking to a Polish gentleman and found out that the title Tsar, was also stolen from Ukraine. Their leadership. Literally nothing in Muscovite culture, identity, history, none of it is theirs. Revisionist history is all lies. Everything in their culture, identity, their name, their identity, even their language is stolen from somebody else. None of it belongs to them. Nothing. They stole it from somebody else. The only thing that is genuine to Muscovite history, culture, and identity is betrayal, lies, theft, brutal violence, and the savagery of genocide. Oh yeah, and alcoholism, which has been a thing for centuries, apparently. That's it. That's the only thing that actually belongs to the Muscovites, other than the Muscovite name, which is where the name Moscow comes from. And like I said, they're not even Slavic. They're Finno-Ugric descendants. Everything is a lie in Muscovia. Everything they claim is a lie. You really think they can be trusted for anything? When they violate signed agreements, betray allies, and murder civilians, children, for personal gain. Hell, the Muscovites will literally sell their own parents, their children, their brothers and sisters for profit. And if anybody lives even the slightest bit better than they do, the sheer savagery of their jealous rage is such that they will literally murder their neighbor for earning $1 more than they do. Because how dare you live better than they do? And it's been stated by multiple people that when the Muscovites showed up and took over, invaded people's homes in eastern Ukraine, they asked, who let you live this way? Who let you live so well? Who allowed you to live this well, this good? They not only steal anything that ain't nailed down, they will vandalize and destroy what they can't steal. And they've been doing it not just the last 10 years. They've been doing it for centuries. Now, I will say there are individuals who are fighting against this way of life, desperate to escape it and actually build a better life for themselves, their family. They've left the country seeking better. They're against the genocide in Ukraine. They're against the war in Ukraine. They're against what Putin is doing. In fact, many of them are even standing with Ukraine, some of them picking up arms to actively fight against Putin's regime. And they're actually entering Muscovian territory, telling the civilians to flee, and destroying every military target on Russian territory. in Belgorod and surrounding areas. I applaud them, because they are sick and tired of the savagery that is inflicted not only on their neighboring countries, but upon the Muscovite people, the Muscovian people, by a few in power. They're sick of it. United 24 posted a video about the Komi people, K-O-M-I, in the Siberian region of the Muscovite Federation. There are more than 30, I think, separate indigenous peoples across the Muscovite Federation and Siberia, Northern Asia, and Eastern Europe, that have elected, they want to leave the Muscovite Federation. They don't want anything to do with any of that anymore. They're sick of it. They're sick of being genocided. They want to reclaim their identity, their language, their culture, everything. They have elected transitional leadership for their countries, or what would become their country, their territory. They are having coalitions of these, with other leaderships of these various sub-countries within Muscovia, not only to support and bolster each other, but they're even talking about an alliance amongst, a defensive alliance amongst them, not unlike NATO. They have their own leadership, their own autonomy, they are their own country. They've established where their borders are for each country, who their leaderships, their at least transitional leadership's going to be, what they're going to do, all of it. The West needs to get over their fear of a world without the Muscovite Federation, without the Tsarist Soviet Muscovy imperialism. And people say there, oh, what about the nukes? What about the nukes? Well, let me tell you a little something. China, in its communist regime, is fraught with corruption. This corruption has led to their nuclear arsenal being rendered useless one by one, because the hydraulics for the silo doors have been replaced with water instead of hydraulic fluid, because it's cheaper, and the money pocketed by the corrupt oligarchs. So the silos doors won't even open. Rocket fuel replaced by water. The nuclear warhead has to be replaced every 20 years due to nuclear decay and half-life. It becomes useless. That has to be replaced. It hasn't been. Now, if that is happening in China, and the Muscovite Federation and the Soviet and the entrenched Soviet corruption is more than 10 times worse for a much longer protracted period of time in Muscovia, many of those nuclear weapons do you really think are actually still marginally usable? Especially when recent test launches of these missiles have shown failure across the board. And we're talking recent, within the last 2 years. These test launches failed. Absolutely failed. I'd be surprised if even 3% of those warheads even function at all. I'd be really damn surprised. So don't you worry about that. Their arsenal hasn't even been maintained. Hell, look at their conventional arsenal. About a third of former Soviet-era missiles are quite literally rocket-powered boomerangs. There's videos online of Muscovite launchers launching missiles, and the missiles suddenly turning around, coming right back to the launcher. Or going haywire, hitting the ground. Here's the kicker. Oh, but North Korea has these weapons. Yeah, they're worse than the Soviet weapons. Whereas a third of the Soviet missiles are failing. More than half of the North Korean weapons are failing. Are garbage. Absolute garbage. The great Muscovite Empire is quite literally losing a genocidal war that they started against a country with very little to no appreciable air force and no actual navy. What is it at this point? A third of the Black Sea Fleet is on the bottom of the Black Sea? And a good chunk of their aircraft has either been shot down or fell out of the sky? Second army in the world. Talk about scraping the bottom of the barrel. Never mind the fact that Muscovite so-called troops are actually convicted criminals, prisoners, basically being handed a shovel or some other ineffectual handheld potential weapon. It's not even a weapon at all. Pointed to Ukraine and said, go run at that trench line. They're taking criminals, they're taking disabled, they're taking non-ethnic Muscovites, anybody and everybody they possibly can, and shipping them to the front line in Ukraine to die so that they don't have to risk their rich 1%, their oligarch families, and the well-to-dos in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Ethnic Muscovites. And these oligarchs are shipping their families out of Muscovia, safely far away from the Kremlin. So it's impossible to conscript them. It's impossible to send them to the front line. They would never be in danger. They're cowards. You want proof that these people are cowards? There's a video you can find online. It's from Poland. It's a Polish supermarket. A young boy, couldn't have been more than 6. I could be wrong about his age. Looked to be about 6 years old. Speaking Ukrainian to his mother at the supermarket. This big, burly brute of a guy comes walking over, literally punches this young child and knocks him to the ground. Oh, big, strong alpha male Muscovite dipshit. Attacks a child. That child's mother came running up, shoved him away from her son, picks up her son and tries to console him, make sure he's okay, while the boy's father comes out of nowhere and starts beating the crap out of the orc. And yes, they're orcs. Remember my Tolkien analogy earlier? Yeah, that's how they act. And of course, the big burly Muscovite brute tries to run away and hide like the coward he is. These protests of quote-unquote Polish farmers, they're not. They're Muscovite agitators posing as Polish farmers, doing everything possible to drive a wedge between Poland and Ukraine. Hell, they've been pushing their propaganda trying to drive a wedge between Ukraine and every single country on the planet who would seek to support and defend them, who would be their allies. And yes, the US is an ally to Ukraine. During the whole 30 years of bullshit in the Middle East, Ukraine sent soldiers to stand beside and fight beside American soldiers. They bled with us. Ukrainians. Yes, they are our allies. And have been ever since they seceded and declared independence from Moscow in 1991 and were recognized as a sovereign nation by the international groups, other countries around the world. Putin's a coward. He's never going to launch nukes. China won't allow it. Besides, even if he did launch nukes, the fallout would go straight into Moscow. Because guess what? If you were to draw a line through the latitudinal parallel that marks the border between the US and Canada, that line would go straight through the middle of Ukraine. What straddles that line in our atmosphere? Oh yeah, the jet stream. Which way does it go? West to east. Just saying. Any nuclear fallout would hit Moscow head on. So we need to stop panicking about nuclear weapons that are never going to get launched. Oh, and decrying World War III as a nuclear war. World War I was considered the war to end all wars. The Great War. World War II. Thank you so much, Hitler. Was also war to end all wars. Horrific. Terrible. World War III does not necessarily have to be nuclear. Conventional weapons do the job just fine. You want to know what's really going on? What Ukrainians are really facing? Try talking to a Ukrainian. Oh, but they're corrupt. We can't trust them at their word. Fine. How about you talk to somebody who's actually been there? I can name quite a few. Let's see here. Andrew Marcado, independent journalist, Army veteran. Dylan Burns, war journalist, American citizen, 22 years old, same age as my son. Let's see here. Oh, Greg Terry, a pastor, a Christian pastor, who's been going to Ukraine for the last 30 years. I could go on. Hell, talk to anybody in NAFO. Oh, what's NAFO? North Atlantic Fellows Organization. This is started out as meme dogs trying to debunk and ridicule Muscovite propaganda. Well, thanks to Ragnar and Dmitry and a whole bunch of their friends in Estonia and around the world, they started the 69th Sniffing Brigade. I'm not going to get into what the 69 means. I think you can do the math there. Sniffing, NAFO, dogs. Shiba Inu is the mascot of NAFO. Hello. Sniffing, dogs, duh. They have been raising money and buying trucks, outfitting those trucks with mud tires, armor, anti-drone jamming equipment, medical supplies, FPV drones, and a whole bunch of other stuff, and driving them from Tallinn, Estonia, through Latvia, through Lithuania, through Poland, into Ukraine, all the way to Kyiv, where frontline soldiers meet up with them, pick them up, drive them to the zero line, to then be utilized for transport of soldiers and equipment, and for rescue of wounded soldiers and evacuation of civilians, and to deliver supplies to civilians and frontline soldiers across the zero line. More than 300 trucks in 2 years have been delivered, including Kazavac vehicles, armored, open bed trucks for artillery crews, enclosed trucks for various things. And they're still doing it. And you can literally sit there, you can watch when Greg Terry goes to Ukraine and takes aid and to the soldiers and literally puts it in their hands. You can watch the videos from NAFO delivering the trucks and handing off the equipment to the soldiers. You can watch the 4 times and counting that Andrew Marcado has been to Ukraine delivering aid and driving trucks to Ukraine. And he plans at least one more this year before he goes all in on US politics because of the election. Guys like Brandon Mitchell, who's a frontline medic. Project Constantine and Pete Hasta-la-Vista. Again, frontline medic. I can't tell you how many lives Pete has literally held in his bare hands, trying desperately to save these men and women and get them out of harm's way. Or the people that Brandon Mitchell has saved, evacuated from harm, or transported lost heroes so that they could get a proper burial. Or people like Rick the Ukrainian, who literally quit his job so that he could go full-time online, raising money for the armed forces of Ukraine to buy trucks, Kazavac vehicles, drones, Cat 7 tourniquets, the good ones that save lives, not the crap that comes out of China and breaks when you use it. IFAC kits, equipment for, let's see, sniper rifles and bipods and scopes for the soldiers, armor for the soldiers, among a great many other things that he raises money for, and literally shows you as he pulls the money from the different sources that he has into one pool, and then takes that money and puts, okay, I'm putting this amount here in this jar, and then you watch the progress bar update with the new amount. Closing multiple fundraisers a week, raising thousands of dollars for Ukraine's warriors on the front line, both fighters and medics, and the wounded soldiers recovering from their injuries. People like Dylan Burns, who literally show you how he is in an in-bed with a humanitarian group trying to save people from flooding when the Kakhovka Dam was destroyed by the Muscovites, while the orcs start shelling him and the rescue workers. There's video of this. And the Muscovites are bragging about it on Telegram. Do you want to know the reality of what's going on across Ukraine? From the mountains to the Azov, from the Carpathian Mountains in the west to the Azov Sea in the east. Do you want to know what's really going on? You want to see firsthand? Watch Civ-Div. Watch Valery Marcus of the 47th. Watch Andrew Marcado Media. Watch Rick the Ukrainian. Dylan Burns. Brandon Mitchell. El Greco. Fish. Project Constantine. Hell, look up 20 Days in Mariupol. Follow Operator Starsky. Pick any of these people and take a good, hard look at reality. And then tell me who's in the right. An innocent country fighting desperately for their right to exist, or an imperialist invader trying to genocide them. I know what genocide is. All three lines of my bloodline have suffered it for 1,000 years. And so has Ukraine.